The police officer's voice crackled through my phone as I stood in the hospital emergency room. "Ms. Blake, we need you to come to the station immediately. Your sister Vanessa confessed to tampering with your vehicle's brake lines. She intended for you to crash." My knees buckled, and I grabbed the nearest chair for support. The room spun around me as I processed what I'd just heard. My own sister, my twin sister, had tried to kill me. But I wasn't surprised. I'd known for 3 months that Vanessa wanted me dead, ever since I'd discovered she was sleeping with my husband Marcus and plotting to steal my inheritance. What the officer didn't know was that I'd been recording every threat, every suspicious action, every piece of evidence that proved Vanessa's plan. My name is Nora Blake, and I'm 29 years old. 4 hours ago, my brakes failed on the highway, sending my car careening into a guardrail at 60 miles per hour. I walked away with minor bruises because I'd had my mechanic install a backup braking system 2 weeks earlier. The same mechanic who'd discovered someone had tampered with my original brake lines and immediately called the police. Vanessa thought she'd finally succeeded in eliminating me. Instead, she'd just walked straight into the trap I'd spent 3 months carefully setting. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I told the officer, hanging up and allowing myself a small smile. Justice was finally coming. 3 months earlier, I'd come home early from a business trip to find Vanessa and Marcus in my bed. They didn't hear me open the front door because they were too busy discussing their plans. "Once Nora's gone, everything will be ours," Marcus said, his voice muffled through the bedroom door. "The house, her trust fund, her share of your parents' estate. We just need to be patient and make it look accidental." Vanessa laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. "I've been patient for 29 years, always being compared to perfect Nora. Always second place to my brilliant twin sister. Not anymore. She has a life insurance policy worth $2 million, and I'm the beneficiary." I stood frozen in my own hallway, my suitcase still in hand, listening to my husband and sister plot my murder. The smart thing would have been to confront them immediately, call the police, file for divorce. But I'd learned long ago that Vanessa was manipulative and cunning. If I accused her without proof, she'd twist the story, play the victim, convince everyone I was jealous and paranoid. Our parents already favored her, always making excuses for her behavior while holding me to impossible standards. So instead of confronting them, I quietly backed out of the house, got in my car, and drove to a hotel. That night, I contacted a private investigator and a divorce attorney. The private investigator, a woman named Kira Walsh, had 20 years of experience with cases like mine. "Your sister and husband are planning to kill you for financial gain," she said during our first meeting at her downtown office. "We need to document everything, their affair, their conversations about your assets, any attempts they make on your life. The more evidence we gather, the stronger your case will be when we involve law enforcement." She paused, studying my face. "But Nora, this is dangerous. If they suspect you know, they might accelerate their timeline. You need to act completely normal while we build the case." I nodded, understanding the risk. For the next 3 months, I played the role of the oblivious wife and trusting sister. Kira installed hidden cameras throughout my house, positioned to capture the living room, kitchen, and hallway outside the bedroom. We couldn't legally record inside the bedroom itself, but the other areas were sufficient. Within a week, we had footage of Vanessa and Marcus meeting at my house when I was supposedly at work. We had audio of them discussing various methods, tampering with my car, causing an accident during one of my regular morning runs, even poisoning my coffee. They rejected each idea for being too obvious or too risky, always coming back to making it look like a tragic accident that wouldn't raise suspicions. Meanwhile, I consulted with my divorce attorney, Andrew Morrison, about protecting my assets. "If something happens to you before the divorce is finalized, Marcus would inherit everything as your spouse," Andrew explained grimly. "We need to change your will immediately, remove him as beneficiary on all accounts and insurance policies, and document his affair as grounds for divorce. But we have to be strategic. If he realizes you're cutting him off financially, that might trigger them to act sooner." We devised a plan. I'd quietly update my will and beneficiaries through my attorney, citing routine estate planning. The changes would be backdated slightly to make them look like they'd been in place before I discovered the affair. Meanwhile, I'd continue acting normal at home, giving no indication I suspected anything. It was exhausting and terrifying. Every morning, I kissed Marcus goodbye and pretended everything was fine. Every time Vanessa called to chat or suggest we meet for coffee, I smiled and agreed, all while wearing a hidden recording device Kira had provided. The recordings were damning. Vanessa complained constantly about how unfair it was that I'd inherited equal shares of our parents' estate when she'd been the one who stayed close to home and visited them regularly. She resented that I'd married Marcus first, even though she'd introduced us. She hated that my career was more successful than hers, that I had the bigger house, the nicer car, the life she believed should have been hers. "You've always had everything handed to you," Vanessa said during one coffee meeting I'd secretly recorded. "Mom and Dad paid for your college completely while I had to take loans. You got the full scholarship to graduate school. You landed the perfect job right after graduation. It's like the universe just gives you whatever you want." I listened to her litany of complaints, offering sympathetic murmurs while my recording device captured every word. The resentment in her voice was palpable and disturbing. This wasn't just about money or Marcus. This was about a lifetime of perceived slights and comparisons that had twisted into homicidal rage. "I worked hard for everything I have," I reminded her gently, not wanting to provoke her suspicion. Vanessa waved dismissively. "You've always been the favorite. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect life. Well, perfection doesn't last forever." The implied threat hung in the air between us, but I just smiled and changed the subject. That recording went straight to Kira, who was building a comprehensive evidence file. By the end of the second month, we had dozens of recordings, video footage of Vanessa and Marcus together at my house, financial records showing Marcus had been draining our joint account to fund a separate account he shared with Vanessa, and documented threats against my life. Kira brought all of it to a detective she trusted, explaining the situation and the danger I was in. Detective Troy Hayes listened to everything Kira presented, reviewed the evidence carefully, and made a decision. "This is serious, but we need something concrete to make arrests stick," he said during our meeting at the police station. "Right now, we have conspiracy and intent, but no actual attempt on Ms. Blake's life. The moment they make a move, the moment they actually try something, we can intervene. And charge them with attempted murder." He looked at me seriously. "That means you'll be in danger until they act. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the alternative. Confronting them now with what I knew, getting a restraining order, filing for divorce publicly. They'd just disappear and try again later when I wasn't prepared. "I want them arrested and prosecuted," I told Detective Hayes. "I'll take the risk if it means they face real consequences." We agreed on a strategy. I'd continue my normal routine while Detective Hayes coordinated with local police to monitor my movements. Kira would maintain surveillance on Vanessa and Marcus, tracking their activities and alerting authorities if they made any suspicious purchases or preparations. And I'd take precautions, varying my routes to work, having my mechanic inspect my car weekly, avoiding situations where I'd be isolated or vulnerable. "The moment they try something, we'll be ready," Detective Hayes assured me. "They'll be arrested immediately, and all this evidence will support the charges." 2 weeks later, during a routine inspection, my mechanic Tony discovered someone had tampered with my brake fluid reservoir. "Someone drained most of the fluid and loosened the connection," Tony explained, showing me the evidence under my car. "If you'd driven on the highway, you would have lost braking power completely. This was deliberate sabotage." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. "Can you fix it and preserve the evidence?" Tony nodded, already calling Detective Hayes. This was the concrete attempt we'd been waiting for. The police documented everything: photographs of the tampering, the tool's marks on the reservoir, even fingerprints they found on the undercarriage that would later match Vanessa's. But Detective Hayes made a strategic decision. "Don't arrest them yet," he told his team. "We know they'll try again, probably with something more definitive. Let's install a backup braking system on Ms. Blake's car without them knowing, and wait for the next attempt. When they think they've succeeded, when they are confident and careless, that's when we make our move." It sounded insane, letting my would-be murderers try again, but I understood the logic. If we arrested them now, expensive lawyers might get the charges reduced or dismissed. But if we caught them in the act of a more serious attempt, with clear intent and malice, the case would be airtight. So Tony installed a secondary braking system that would activate if the primary system failed. I continued my routine, pretending I noticed nothing wrong with my car. Vanessa called me 2 days after the first tampering attempt, her voice cheerful and innocent. Hey sis, want to grab lunch tomorrow? There's this new place downtown I've been wanting to try. I agreed, knowing she was probably checking if I was still alive, still unsuspecting. During lunch, she seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone and asking if everything was okay. You seem stressed, she commented, studying my face. Work has been intense, I lied smoothly. Lots of deadlines and pressure. But I'm managing. Vanessa nodded sympathetically, but I caught something else in her expression, disappointment. She'd expected me to be dead or injured by now. That evening, Marcus suggested we take a weekend trip to the mountains. Just the two of us, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We haven't had quality time together in months. Red flags went up immediately. A remote location, winding mountain roads, opportunities for an accident far from witnesses or help. That sounds wonderful, I replied, already texting Kira and Detective Hayes about the plan. Let me check my work calendar. I pretended to consider it for a few days before declining, citing an important project deadline. Marcus seemed frustrated but didn't push. They were getting impatient, which meant the next attempt would come soon. Kira's surveillance confirmed my suspicions. She'd captured footage of Vanessa purchasing tools and researching brake line locations. She's planning something more sophisticated, Kira reported during our weekly update. She's been watching YouTube videos about automotive systems and visiting auto parts stores. My guess is she's going to try cutting your actual brake lines this time, not just draining the fluid. Detective Hayes increased police presence around my neighborhood and coordinated with Tony to reinforce the backup braking system. When she makes her move, we'll be watching, he assured me. You'll be safe, and she'll be caught in the act. 3 days later, my home security camera captured Vanessa entering my garage at 2 a.m. using the spare key I'd never asked her to return. She wore gloves and carried a small tool bag. I watched the footage live from my bedroom, my phone connected to the security system. Kira and Detective Hayes were watching too, along with 2 police units parked nearby waiting for the signal. Vanessa spent 40 minutes under my car, working carefully and methodically. The surveillance footage showed her cutting through the brake lines, then wiping down surfaces to remove any trace evidence. She was thorough and careful, someone who'd clearly researched how to commit the perfect crime. When she finally left, sneaking out through the back gate, Detective Hayes made a decision. We don't stop her yet. We let Ms. Blake discover the damage in the morning, and we see what happens next. This is attempted murder, and we need to catch them celebrating their success. The next morning, I went through my normal routine: shower, coffee, getting ready for work. My hands shook slightly as I grabbed my car keys, knowing what I'd find but still terrified of the reality. Tony was already waiting in an unmarked van down the street, ready to follow me and intervene if necessary. Detective Hayes had coordinated with Highway Patrol to clear a section of road and monitor my drive. I started the car, pulled out of my driveway, and headed toward the highway. The brakes worked fine initially because Vanessa had cut the lines in a way that would fail gradually as brake fluid leaked out. By the time I merged onto the highway, traveling at 60 miles per hour, the brake pedal went soft. I pressed down and felt nothing. The car continued accelerating as I approached a curve, and panic flooded my system despite knowing about the backup system. I pressed the emergency brake button Tony had installed on my dashboard, and the backup system engaged immediately, slowing the car smoothly. But I didn't want Vanessa to know it had worked. Instead, I let the car drift toward the guardrail, hitting it at an angle that looked dramatic but was carefully controlled. The airbags deployed, the car spun slightly, and I came to rest against the metal barrier. Tony and the police were there within seconds, along with an ambulance that had been staged nearby. They pulled me from the car, loaded me onto a stretcher, and rushed me to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors examined me and confirmed what I already knew: minor bruising, slight whiplash, nothing serious. But to everyone else, including Vanessa and Marcus, I was a victim of a terrible accident. A nurse handed me my phone, and I saw 12 missed calls from Marcus and 7 from Vanessa. I didn't answer. Instead, I waited for Detective Hayes to arrive with news. Your car has been towed to the police forensics bay, he told me quietly, standing beside my hospital bed. We have clear evidence of the cut brake lines, and we have security footage of Vanessa in your garage last night. We're getting a warrant for her arrest right now. My phone rang again. This time it was Vanessa. I answered, putting it on speaker so Detective Hayes could hear. "Oh my God, Nora." Vanessa's voice was frantic, but I detected something underneath: excitement, maybe even satisfaction. "I just heard about your accident. Are you okay? Where are you?" She was checking if I was dead. "I'm at County Hospital," I said weakly, playing the role of an injured victim. "The brakes failed. I hit the guardrail on Highway 40. The doctors are still running tests." Silence on the other end, then Vanessa's voice again, carefully modulated to sound concerned. "I'll be right there. Don't worry, sis. Everything will be okay." She hung up, and Detective Hayes nodded. "She's coming here thinking you're incapacitated. That's when we'll arrest her." 40 minutes later, Vanessa rushed into my hospital room with an expression of exaggerated worry. "Nora. Thank God you're alive." She grabbed my hand, and I noticed her checking the monitors, assessing how injured I actually was. "It was terrifying," I told her, watching her face carefully. "The brakes just stopped working. I couldn't slow down at all." Vanessa made sympathetic noises, but her eyes were scanning the room, probably looking for doctors or nurses who might give her information about my prognosis. "Did they say what caused it? Brake failure is so unusual in a car as new as yours." She was fishing for information, wanting to know if the police suspected tampering. "They're investigating," I replied vaguely. "The car was towed for analysis." Vanessa's expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. Fear. She was wondering if they'd find evidence. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, noticing she'd come alone. "He's on his way," Vanessa said quickly. "He was in a meeting when I called him." That was a lie. According to Kira's surveillance, Marcus and Vanessa had been together at her apartment when news of my accident reached them. They'd celebrated with champagne before she'd rushed to the hospital to play the concerned sister. Detective Hayes chose that moment to enter the room, his badge visible on his belt. "Ms. Blake, I'm Detective Hayes. I need to speak with you about your accident." Vanessa's face went pale. "Is something wrong, Detective?" Detective Hayes looked at her appraisingly. "And you are?" "Vanessa Blake, Nora's sister." "I see. Ms. Vanessa Blake, I need you to come with me, please. We have some questions about your whereabouts last night." Vanessa's eyes widened. "What? Why would you need to know that? I was home sleeping." "Then you won't mind answering a few questions at the station," Detective Hayes said calmly. Two uniformed officers appeared in the doorway. "Vanessa Blake, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder." The officers moved forward, and Vanessa started backing away, her face a mask of shock and panic. "This is insane. Nora, tell them this is a mistake." I met her eyes steadily. "I know what you did, Vanessa. I know about you and Marcus. I know about your plan to kill me for my inheritance. I've known for 3 months, and I've been gathering evidence the entire time." Her expression transformed from panic to rage. "You knew? You've been setting me up." "No," I corrected. "You set yourself up. I just documented your crimes." The officers handcuffed Vanessa as she screamed threats and accusations. "You always thought you were so much better than me. This is exactly why I wanted you gone." Her confession in front of 3 police officers was beautiful. Detective Hayes read her rights while she continued ranting about how unfair her life had been, how I'd stolen everything from her, how she deserved my life more than I did. As they led Vanessa from the room, Detective Hayes turned to me. "We're also arresting your husband. Officers are picking him up at his office right now. We have enough evidence to charge both of them with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud." Marcus was arrested 30 minutes later and immediately tried to cut a deal, claiming Vanessa had manipulated him, that he'd never actually intended to hurt me. But the recordings and surveillance footage told a different story. He'd been an active participant in planning my death, motivated by greed and lust. Within 24 hours, both were formally charged. The evidence was overwhelming: the security footage of Vanessa tampering with my car, the recordings of them discussing various murder methods, the financial records showing they'd been stealing from me. My attorney Andrew filed for divorce that same day, citing adultery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder as grounds. He also filed restraining orders against both Vanessa and Marcus, ensuring they couldn't contact me or come near me even if they made bail. The bail hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. I attended, sitting in the courtroom and watching as the prosecutor presented evidence of the attempted murder. The judge listened carefully, reviewed the security footage of Vanessa under my car, and heard the recorded conversations about their plans. These defendants represent a clear and ongoing danger to the victim, the prosecutor argued. They attempted to murder her for financial gain and showed no remorse. Bail should be denied entirely. The judge agreed. Bail was denied for both defendants pending trial. Vanessa screamed in the courtroom that it was unfair, that I'd orchestrated everything to frame her. Marcus sat silently, his expensive lawyer already calculating what kind of plea deal might be possible. I left the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. The threat was neutralized, justice was in motion, and I could finally breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. But there was still work to do. The divorce proceedings moved forward quickly given the circumstances. Marcus's attorney tried to claim he deserved half of my assets despite the attempted murder charges, arguing that property division was separate from criminal proceedings. Andrew shut that down efficiently. Your client conspired to murder my client to steal her assets, Andrew told the judge during our first divorce hearing. He drained their joint accounts, committed adultery with her sister, and actively participated in a plot to end her life. He's entitled to nothing. The judge agreed, especially after reviewing the prenuptial agreement Marcus and I had signed before getting married. The prenup had an infidelity clause that voided any claim Marcus might have to my separate property or inheritance. He'd signed it willingly 5 years ago, never imagining it would be used against him. The divorce was finalized within 2 months. I kept everything: the house, my inheritance, my trust fund, my retirement accounts. Marcus got nothing except his personal belongings and mounting legal bills. Vanessa's criminal trial began in late summer, 4 months after her arrest. I was the prosecution's star witness, testifying about discovering the affair, Vanessa's threats and resentment, and the 3 months I'd spent documenting their murder plot. The defense attorney tried to paint me as paranoid, suggesting I'd misinterpreted innocent conversations and set up my own sister because of jealousy over Marcus. Is it true you installed hidden cameras in your home without your husband's knowledge? The attorney asked during cross-examination. Yes, I confirmed. After I discovered he and my sister were having an affair and planning to kill me. But you didn't confront them. You secretly recorded them instead. Doesn't that seem manipulative? No, I replied calmly. It seems smart. If I'd confronted them without evidence, they would have denied everything and probably accelerated their timeline to kill me. Recording their conversations and actions gave me proof of their intent and protected my life. The prosecutor then presented the security footage showing Vanessa in my garage at 2 a.m., cutting my brake lines while wearing gloves. It was damning and irrefutable. Vanessa's attorney had no good explanation for why she'd been under my car in the middle of the night with cutting tools. The jury watched the footage in silence, their expressions shifting from skeptical to horrified. Vanessa took the stand in her own defense and made everything worse. She ranted about how I'd always been the favorite, how our parents had loved me more. She claimed she'd only been trying to scare me, not actually hurt me. I didn't think the brakes would actually completely fail, Vanessa insisted from the witness stand. I just wanted her to have a close call, to feel vulnerable for once in her perfect life. The prosecutor destroyed her testimony during cross-examination. You researched brake line location and cutting techniques. You purchased specific tools. You entered the garage at 2 a.m. wearing gloves. You cut through the brake lines completely. And when you called your sister in the hospital, you asked specific questions about the accident and seemed disappointed she'd survived. Does that sound like someone who just wanted to scare their sister, or someone who wanted them dead? Vanessa had no good answer. Marcus's trial followed 2 weeks later. His defense strategy was to blame everything on Vanessa, claiming she'd seduced him and manipulated him into the affair and the murder plot. I was weak, he testified, actually crying on the stand. Vanessa convinced me that Nora didn't love me anymore, that she was planning to leave me anyway. She said if we were together, we could have the life we deserved. But the recordings told a different story. Marcus's voice clearly discussing splitting my life insurance money, Marcus suggesting various accident scenarios, Marcus draining our joint accounts to fund his new life with Vanessa. The jury didn't buy his victim act. Both were convicted within a month of each other. Vanessa was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Marcus received 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. The sentences were longer than I'd expected, but the judge had been clear. These defendants planned and attempted to murder someone they claimed to love, purely for financial gain. They showed no remorse, only anger at being caught. Society needs protection from people capable of such calculated cruelty. I attended both sentencing hearings, sitting quietly in the courtroom as my sister and ex-husband were led away in handcuffs. Vanessa glared at me one last time, her expression filled with hatred. "I hope you're happy," she spat as the bailiffs escorted her out. "I hope your perfect life was worth destroying your own sister." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who'd tried to kill me. After the trials concluded, I had to deal with the emotional aftermath. My parents, who'd always favored Vanessa, initially refused to believe she was guilty. "You must have provoked her," my mother said during a painful phone conversation. "Vanessa wouldn't have done this without a reason." Hearing my own mother suggest I deserved attempted murder was devastating. "Mom, she tried to kill me," I said slowly. "She cut my brake lines hoping I'd crash and die so she could inherit my money. That's not provocation. That's premeditated murder." My mother made excuses, claiming Vanessa must have been mentally ill, that I should have been more understanding of her struggles. Finally, I'd had enough. Until you can acknowledge that Vanessa alone is responsible for her choices and her crimes, we have nothing more to discuss. I disconnected the call and blocked both my parents' numbers. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, losing my entire family in one catastrophic sequence of betrayals. But I couldn't maintain relationships with people who blamed me for nearly being murdered. My father called my attorney instead, asking if I'd consider paying for Vanessa's appeal. Andrew's response was blunt: "Your daughter tried to murder her sister for money. Ms. Blake owes her nothing, least of all financial support for her legal defense." I never heard from my parents again after that. 6 months after the trials, I sold the house where Marcus and Vanessa had plotted my death. Too many bad memories haunted those rooms. I bought a smaller place across town, something that was entirely mine with no connection to them. I also changed my career, leaving the corporate job I'd had and starting my own financial consulting firm focused on helping women protect their assets during divorces and family conflicts. I learned the hard way how important it is to safeguard yourself financially, I told my first clients. Separating your accounts, updating your will, documenting evidence, these steps can literally save your life. The business grew quickly through word of mouth. Women facing divorces, dealing with financial abuse, or navigating family estate disputes sought my expertise. I helped them create paper trails, protect their assets, and gather evidence when needed. It was fulfilling work that gave meaning to everything I'd survived. And I made sure every client understood: trust, but verify. Even with family, especially with family. A year after Vanessa's conviction, I received a letter from her in prison. I debated whether to read it, ultimately deciding I needed closure. The letter was long, rambling, and utterly lacking in genuine remorse. Vanessa wrote about how prison was teaching her patience, how she was using the time to reflect on her life choices. But then she veered into familiar territory, complaining about how I'd always had everything handed to me, how the justice system had been unfair to her, how if our parents had loved her as much as they loved me, none of this would have happened. "You got what you wanted," she wrote in the final paragraph. "I'm in prison, Marcus is in prison, and you have everything. I hope you're satisfied." I read the letter twice, looking for any hint of understanding or accountability. There was none. Vanessa still saw herself as the victim of circumstances and favoritism, not as someone who'd made terrible choices driven by jealousy and greed. I didn't respond. There was no point in engaging with someone so committed to her own victimhood narrative. Instead, I filed the letter away with all the other evidence from the case, a reminder of how far someone could fall when consumed by resentment. Marcus also wrote, his letter more calculated and manipulative. He apologized profusely, claimed he'd been under Vanessa's influence, and suggested that if I'd been more attentive to his needs, he never would have strayed. Classic abuser tactics: apologize while simultaneously blaming the victim. I threw his letter away without finishing it. I owed neither of them my time, my forgiveness, or my emotional energy. 2 years after the arrests, I was invited to speak at a conference for women in finance about protecting yourself from financial fraud and family exploitation. I shared my story publicly for the first time, walking the audience through how I'd discovered the affair, documented the threats, and worked with law enforcement to build a case. The hardest part wasn't the danger, I told the packed conference room. It was continuing to act normal, to smile at people who wanted me dead, to pretend I didn't know what they were planning. But that patience and strategic thinking saved my life and ensured they faced real consequences. The questions during the Q&A session were thoughtful and engaged. One woman asked if I regretted not confronting Vanessa and Marcus immediately when I'd first discovered their affair. Sometimes, I admitted honestly. Part of me wishes I'd just kicked Marcus out and cut Vanessa off that very first day. But if I had, they probably would have tried again later when I wasn't prepared. By documenting everything and working with the police, I ensured they couldn't hurt me or anyone else. Another woman asked how I dealt with losing my entire family. That loss was devastating, I acknowledged. But I had to accept that my parents chose to enable Vanessa's behavior rather than hold her accountable. Some relationships aren't worth maintaining, even family relationships, if they require you to accept blame for someone else's crimes. The response to my talk was overwhelming. Dozens of women approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of family betrayal, financial abuse, and domestic violence. Several asked for my consulting services, wanting help protecting their assets and gathering evidence in their own situations. I gave each one my card and encouraged them to prioritize their safety above everything else. Document everything, I told them. Keep records somewhere safe that your abuser can't access. Talk to a lawyer who specializes in this type of case. And trust your instincts. If someone's behavior feels threatening, it probably is. My consulting firm continued expanding, and I hired 2 additional consultants to help with the growing caseload. We specialized in cases involving family financial fraud, estate manipulation, and divorce-related asset protection. Word spread through legal networks that we were thorough, discreet, and effective. Attorneys started referring their clients to us when they suspected financial misconduct. 3 years after Vanessa's conviction, I received an unexpected call from the prison. Vanessa was requesting a meeting, claiming she had information about other criminal activity she'd witnessed and wanted to discuss it with me specifically. I was immediately suspicious. This feels like manipulation, I told Kira, who I still occasionally consulted on complex cases. Vanessa doesn't do anything without an ulterior motive. Kira agreed but suggested I might learn something useful. Go with a lawyer present, she advised. See what she wants, but don't give her anything in return. I arranged the prison visit with Andrew accompanying me. The meeting room was stark and depressing, separated by thick glass with phones for communication. When Vanessa was brought in, I barely recognized her. 3 years in prison had aged her dramatically. She looked tired, worn down, nothing like the vibrant woman who'd tried to kill me. We picked up the phones simultaneously. Hello, Vanessa. Nora. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. What did you want to tell me? I asked, not interested in small talk. Vanessa glanced at Andrew, then back at me. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the defensive garbage I wrote in that letter. I waited, skeptical. I've had a lot of time to think, Vanessa continued. Therapy, self-reflection, all of it. And I finally understand that everything that happened was my fault. Not yours, not mom and dad's, mine. I let jealousy and resentment poison me until I was willing to commit murder. Tears filled her eyes. I can't take back what I did. I can't give you back the months you spent in fear, or the family relationships that were destroyed. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how twisted my thinking was, how I blamed you for my own failures and insecurities. I studied her face, looking for manipulation or deception. She seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled before. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But it doesn't change anything. You tried to kill me, Vanessa. You cut my brake lines hoping I'd die in a fiery crash so you could steal my inheritance. That's not something an apology can fix. I know, Vanessa whispered. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for you to help me or anything like that. I just needed you to hear that I understand what I did was unforgivable. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. Finally, I asked the question I'd wondered about for 3 years. When did you start hating me enough to want me dead? Vanessa looked down at her hands. I think I've always resented you, even when we were kids. You were better at everything: school, sports, making friends. Mom and Dad were so proud of you, and I was always the disappointing twin. Over time, that resentment grew into something darker. By the time I met Marcus, I wasn't just jealous of your success. I genuinely believed I deserved your life more than you did. So you decided to take it. Yes. And it almost destroyed me in a different way than I planned. The visit ended shortly after. As I left the prison with Andrew, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Vanessa's apology didn't erase what she'd done or repair our relationship, but it provided some understanding of the psychological damage that had led to her crimes. Do you believe she was sincere? Andrew asked as we drove away. I think she's sincere about understanding what she did wrong, I replied. Whether that translates to genuine remorse or just regret about getting caught, I'm not sure. But it doesn't really matter. She's facing the consequences of her choices either way. 4 years after my brakes failed on that highway, I stood in my consulting firm's expanded office space, surrounded by my team of 5 consultants and 3 administrative staff. We'd just finished a major case helping a woman prove her husband had been embezzling from their joint business. The evidence we'd gathered ensured she retained full ownership and he faced criminal charges. Cases like that reminded me why I'd started this business: to help people protect themselves from the very betrayals I'd experienced. My life looked nothing like it had 4 years ago. New career, new home, new circle of friends who'd proven their loyalty through the aftermath of the trial.